Now, a WFSB Plus original. This is the Capitol Rundown.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Capitol Rundown, where we bring you politics that matter to you from both sides of the aisle. And we start with our Republican voice, Themis Klarides, and we also have our Democratic strategist, Tickey. Thank you, both of you, for being here. As every week, we have so much to talk about.
As always.
We're hearing some feedback from the peanut gallery, all of you watching, that it helps them to just kind of understand, because there's so much going on. We want to take this time to just let people hear it like it is, so to speak, from both sides and be balanced. So thank you both for being here.
Happy to be here.
All right, so let's start with the Trump tariffs. There was a big pause and there was a big rally in the stock market. I mean, we literally all saw our 401ks go back up a lot. That, of course, feels good, but as far as where we go from here, Themis, can you weigh in on the tariff policies and what we're experiencing?
Well, we did all see that, and that allowed us all to exhale a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, it is a very anxious time for everybody. And so now he did this, and everybody's worried, what is he going to do next? Is he going to go back on it? And, you know, the interesting part to me with these tariffs with China in particular is that there were countries that really benefited from these very high tariffs, 145% tariffs on China, namely Vietnam, Southeast Asia, countries like Thailand, et cetera, and Mexico, because what they've been operating on for the past 10 years is China plus one, meaning a lot of companies, for example, Apple, who were getting, were going through China for their products, and they were for their labor and different things. They were trying to diversify away from China because their tariffs were high and the labor costs were high. So Mexico was taking advantage of that in the past 6 weeks, and Vietnam was taking advantage of that. So now, because the tariffs are backing off, Mexico, Vietnam, Thailand, a lot of those countries are all trying to negotiate a better deal with the United States. So they have a lower tariff than China does. Because even with the backing off of the tariffs and this pause that the president put on it, they're still at 30%, which a lot of the other countries are at 10%. So they're basically all trying to one-up each other to benefit and make it cheaper for countries and businesses to use them instead of China.
Before we get to you, Jimmy, does that mean on some level that Trump's idea of I'm just going to get everyone to the table is working?
None of us know whether he has a grand scheme in his mind or he just kind of throws stuff out there. He's not a stupid man. I mean, he certainly has a skill set and a business knowledge. I think that, on a 40,000-foot level, scaring the heck out of all these countries that now it's a new president and we mean business was beneficial to a certain extent. Now, the fact that they scared American citizens and the stock market went down and it hurt everybody, from wealthy to poorest and everybody in between, was not beneficial. But, it certainly brought people to the table. And so you have to look at the positive and the negative.
All right, Jimmy, I'm sure you have things to say about this, but at the moment there's a pause and people are exhaling.
Yeah, so we exhale because what tends to happen is that he creates some sort of an issue or a problem. He then disrupts, and that disruption usually is at the expense of working families. And then he will back off or back down and then celebrate that as a victory. With the tariffs, which China was at 145%, it's now back down to 30%. China made no concessions, but you are now seeing those tariffs come back down because there was a real concern from economists and from people in everyday life that they were seeing the prices increase. They were seeing a threat that the store shelves would just not be stocked anymore because of the expense to get those products here to America. And as we've said before, tariffs are a tax, and so that tax was going to be passed on to consumers. Businesses were not going to take on that expense. That was going to be passed on to the consumer. And I also think the tariff conversation showed how important it is to work with our allies. Working with our allies is a good thing. We're in a global economy, and we do so much trade with Mexico and Canada and getting lumber and appliances, fruits and vegetables from Mexico, and working with our allied countries to build these partnerships because we are in a global economy. So a thoughtful approach, and we are still making up for the losses that we had under President Trump, over $5 trillion lost in the stock market, and that is directly tied to people's savings, 401ks, the investments that we have as families, and also as a state of Connecticut. We want those investments to be doing better, and that kind of disruption was not helpful at all for people.
But I think you can add, when you talk about China hasn't made any concessions, but what has happened is it is starting to push with the China One policy, push other countries and other businesses away from using China, which is what we want. Because we want to take as much away from China as possible because of what they're doing and what we believe. So that is a silver lining to it.
Right, and we have talked on this show about targeted tariffs, and that is actually something that has been bipartisan, specific to China. They go after so much of our intelligence, let alone artificial intelligence, but they go after our intelligence, and so having targeted tariffs would be thoughtful rather than just kind of disrupting the entire system and blowing up the markets.
So we'll see where that goes. We're going to leave it there for now and talk about something a little more personal, which is your medicine cabinet. There is this order, that executive order, that President Trump would like to see drug prices come down, and if they don't, then saying that Medicare will only pay a certain amount, which would sort of force them down. And that may sound like a good thing of let's have a cheaper drug price. I think a lot of people like that on the surface. How does this affect, though, the pipeline, local companies, Pfizer? Themis, let's start with you.
Well, I think that this is one of those nonpartisan and bipartisan issues. I mean, everybody wants their drug prices to go down. The question is, how do we go about it? And so based on what we've seen and what we've heard about this plan, it's more aspirational in a sense, that he's saying, okay, in a month, we're going to give you targets of what you need to get to. And within 6 months, if you haven't gotten kind of close to those targets, then we're going to do something about it, which doesn't really tell people a lot. And if you don't get there, we're going to go into most favored nations status, which basically says other countries are paying much less for pharmaceuticals than we are. We pay 3 times more than 33 other countries who are similarly situated to us. What we're not realizing is, when we look at those numbers, is we're kind of talking apples and oranges in a lot of ways, because in a lot of those countries, the government has the purchasing power and purchases the drugs. So they operate and they order it and plan it in a discounted way. So you can't really compare the two, and that's a separate conversation. Like, is that the kind of country we want to have? And is that how we want our prescription drugs ordered? Now, there are very positive things to the way we have it now, in the sense that it's much easier for us to get our medicines than a lot of those other countries. Okay. We have a lot more our insurance, the things that stand in our way, the barricades that stand in our way for insurance discounts are greater than the other countries. But the fact of the matter is, right now, we've been negotiating with Medicare on certain drug prices, and that has worked to a certain extent in the past few years, and they're still doing that. So the question is, do we go back to that and negotiate drug by drug, or do we do this and figure out if it works or not? Like right now, again, I believe this is an aspirational plan. There's got to be more meat on the bones. But all you need to know about this plan is the day that it happened, most drug companies' prices went up 4%. And our very own Pfizer in Connecticut went up 4%, Merck went up 6%, and on the average it was 4%. Because they believe, they were scared, they were braced for something really bad that would hurt them, but they believe that there's more bark than bite with this. So okay. I think we say stay tuned.
Jimmy.
Yes, I think aspirational is a nice way to put it, because I wouldn't have anyone hold their breath just yet on what this executive order does. I mean, the executive order asks companies to voluntarily lower their prices. We'll see if that actually were to happen. But I think what's important is that if you wanted to really lower drug prices, you do it legislatively. And time again with President Trump, you see a lot of executive orders of how he would like things to go, but there's no guarantee that anything will actually follow suit. If you wanted to lower drug prices, you would do it through Congress. And in fact, in 2022, the Congress, the House, the Senate, and signed by the former president, President Biden at that time, lowered prescription drugs. The trouble with legislation is it's Loctite, but it happens in the future. So even though that legislation was passed in 2022, it does not take effect until January 1st, 2026. And those on Medicare will see a $2,000 annual cap, and the 10 most expensive drugs under Medicare are now negotiated. So we want to be continuing to negotiate those drug prices and to really act on healthcare and to really act on the price of prescription drugs. Do it legislatively, do it with some teeth, rather than through an executive order that may never happen.
Well, the problem with that was, though, it was only Medicare, right? It didn't help any people outside of Medicare. So I'm not saying that that wasn't a good plan, but I think this has to be a bigger plan with separate parts. That can be part of it, but we have to approach this in a much bigger way.
And the president should work with Congress then and get congressional Republicans on the record if they agree.
I know you guys have a lot to say, but I want to get to these other topics. Okay, so we had a new Pope. I happened to be here during Eyewitness News at noon, and we literally watched a little bit of smoke coming out as I was taking a picture of the seagull, and then I realized it was white, and we're on the air to announce Pope Leo, and it's an American Pope. We are one of the most Catholic states in the United States. Does this have, it certainly has a geopolitical impact, I want you to weigh in on that, and any specifics for our state, given that we do have a lot of Catholics here, and I know you have a famous Catholic. You know that John Rowland had lunch with the new Pope?
No, he went to Villanova with him.
Oh, he went to Villanova.
He was 2 years ahead of him, I guess. So he's known him for many years.
Okay, so quickly on this, because I want to make sure we get to the others. But what do we need to know about how this new Pope could affect all lives?
Well, I think we knew that when Pope Francis passed, there was a big debate, within the conclave amongst the cardinals. Do we want a pope like Pope Francis was, which is much more progressive than there had been in the past, or there was obviously a large group of people that wanted it move him more to the right, a little more conservative. And I think that Pope Leo now was that kind of meet in the middle kind of choice. But he's clearly leans progressive. There's no question about it. Number one, he's made it very clear he's going to have a strong social media presence, which I think is very interesting and I think is very good. I think he's going to make a difference geopolitically because he has an American perspective on the world, which is going to be the first time we've seen that. And that's always a different perspective than somebody from Italy or somebody from South America in the past. And I think, it will be interesting to look to see his position on global warming and immigration, et cetera, and then women in the church and LGBTQ in the church. And I think those are going to be very interesting things that he's not going to shy away from.
Jimmy?
Yes, well, so the new Pope became a cardinal under Pope Francis, and Pope Francis really, I think, had brought so much renewed faith, especially for young people, when he talked about the importance of refugees and immigrants and the most vulnerable, blessings to the LGBTQ community. So I think I'm very optimistic about it. I know many young people are as well, about this new Pope and his social media presence. He's already rebuked Vice President J.D. Vance in talking about the importance of all people, of refugees and of immigrants. And so we will never know what was discussed in the conclave, but you have to wonder the state of American politics and if that played any role in now having our first ever American Pope.
Interesting. Okay, so let's move on to a lot of talk about arts and movie funding. And, we were just celebrating on Great Day, Connecticut, the Hallmark Movie Trail. Now the guy who loves Connecticut, who makes all the Hallmark movies, is going to Buffalo, New York. There's all of this going on in the legislature. Let's talk about what's been lost. Can we get it back?
Well, under Governor Rell back in 2007, she put the tax credit into place, and it was 30%. And these tax credits are you can sell them, and they oftentimes sell them to insurance companies that are covering the movies. But it's a huge benefit to the movies, and we didn't have any before then. And the tax credit started bringing it in, so that's bringing in business to Connecticut. And every year there's a budget in Connecticut, whether it's the governor or the Democrats or the Republicans, whoever it is, whatever budgets go out, there's always a proposed cut to the tax credit. And this year, we have a 30% tax credit. And this year, Governor Lamont, in his proposed budget, proposed cutting it to 25%. In the Democrats' budget, they proposed keeping it at 30%, but only for the big items for over $10 million. The $1 to $10 million movies like we're talking about, these Hallmark movies. There's been 22 Hallmark movies made in Connecticut in the past 10 years, which was shocking to me because I watch Hallmark movies all the time. Yeah. But they proposed cutting that to 15%. Now, as we've discussed before, those are negotiations. Everything's on the table. And but what he said was New York State now has a 40% cash rebate if you make a movie in New York. He has now moved all those movies, those 22 movies that we've had in 10 years, up to Buffalo, New York. And the guy
Hallmark producer, yeah.
And the man is from Connecticut. He loves it here because I have to recreate Connecticut in Buffalo because who is ever going to leave that money on the table?
Yeah.
Right. And he said in Connecticut, and it's back to the same thing that we heard when IBM left back in, not IBM, but the other company that left, GE, thank you, left back in earlier in the 2000s. We went down and met with the COO, and they said, this last budget that you guys did in the legislature would not have materially affected whether we stayed or we left Connecticut because we do not trust the leadership to stay consistent with what you're doing. And that's exactly what this man from Norwich said. He said, you have to move up this tax credit, not just keep it at 30, put it to 35%, and then commit to 10 years.
Don't threaten to cut it
Because
all the time.
every year it's like you coming and going. I mean, last year you did a movie trail, and now you're trying to cut the tax credit. I mean, make up your mind.
And we're going to run out of time, but Jimmy, I want you to weigh in on that, and then also, I've got people emailing me about what are we going to do? This arts funding has just disappeared.
Right. So this is all a part of the state budget, which we are, as we approach June 4th, we'll have a final state budget. This is really a part of that process. It's true that the 30% was cut in some of the budgets, and it's all being negotiated now. And that has an effect on the movie industry that really has been growing here in Connecticut. The 30% does maintain for a lot of the large TV studios. We obviously have ESPN and NBC Sports and WWE, but it's finding that right balance between the TV and the movie credits and having those industries here in Connecticut, trying to grow them, but also trying to balance a state budget. And you see nips and tucks in the state budget to try to come out with a balanced budget between the governor's budget, the Republicans, and the Democratic budget as well. And then in addition to the movie credits, it is this arts funding. And this has been a conversation for many years, as these arts organizations are also cultural and tourism organizations, bringing people to Connecticut, bringing people to their local towns and to their cities. And an investment in the arts and in tourism actually brings more money to the state as more people come here. So in addition to the movie credits, a real conversation that's happening now is about how do we fund and celebrate our arts organizations and our culture organizations, because it really shows off Connecticut and who we are.
We just need more money. Yeah.
Yes. We always need more money, and we always have great reasons to spend, places to spend money, and a limited amount of money to spend, and that's where the struggle always is.
Well, we'll see how it all comes out. I know we jam-packed it in, everybody, but we want you to continue to watch the Capitol Rundown. I want to let you know how you can do that. If you're streaming it here on WFSB Plus, we're here every week on Wednesday. You can watch us live at 2 p.m. You can also go back and see all the previous episodes. If you want to watch on WFSB.com, just click on local news, and you will find the Capitol Rundown right there. Themis, Klarides, Jimmy Tickey, Republican and Democrat, thank you so much for being here and helping us tell these stories.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Be well.
Go Knicks.